Please like, share, and subscribe. Wishing you happiness and good luck every day.
Hey, welcome. Today, we are going to dive into a framework that has totally changed the way millions of people think about money, about work, and, about their entire future. We're breaking down Robert Kiyosaki's Cashflow Quadrant, a really powerful tool that helps you see your own financial path and, maybe more importantly, where that path is actually taking you.
You've probably heard this a million times, right? It's the advice our parents, our teachers, pretty much all of society tells us to follow. Kiyosaki says this was the big advice from his poor dad, a man who was super educated, a government official, but somehow always struggled with money. It's advice that's all about stability and that steady paycheck.
And that is the big question that kicks this whole thing off. The book just comes right out and challenges this idea head on. It basically asks, what if the very thing you're chasing, job security, is actually what's holding you back from real financial freedom? So how do we even begin to unpack that? While we unpack it with this simple but honestly pretty profound diagram, the cash flow quadrant. Kiyosaki uses this as a kind of map to show the different ways people bring in money. It's split into 4 sections, and each one represents a totally different way of thinking about finances. Let's break them down. First up, we've got the E quadrant. This is where most of us start out, and honestly, where a lot of people stay. As an employee, you're basically trading your time for a paycheck. The key thing to get here is that you're working inside someone else's system, and from a tax standpoint, it's usually the worst place to be. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO or the janitor. If you've got a job, you're in the E quadrant. All right, let's hop over to the S quadrant. These are your I want to be my own boss people. The doctors, the lawyers, the freelance consultants, the person who owns the small coffee shop. They've left the E quadrant to do their own thing. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Kiyosaki says you don't really own a business. You own a job. Because if you stop working, the money stops. You are the system, which makes it almost impossible to grow beyond what you can do yourself. Okay, now we're crossing a huge dividing line over to the right side, to the B quadrant. A business owner doesn't own a job, they own a system. This is everything. A true B can literally walk away for a year, come back, and the business is still running, still making money. Why? Because they built a system and hired great people to run it for them. This is where real leverage comes into play. And finally, we have the I quadrant. This is the end game. This is where the truly wealthy play, where money itself is turned into more wealth. As an investor, you don't work for money at all. Your money works hard for you. Your income comes from assets, real estate, stocks, other businesses that are pumping out cash whether you're awake or asleep. This is where you find the best tax breaks, and it's all about creating wealth, not just earning a living. So we've got these 4 boxes, right? E, S, B, and I. But the line down the middle between the left and the right side, that's more than just about how you get paid. It's a massive difference in how you think, what you value, and what you fear. It's all about your mindset. People on the left side, the E's and the S's, they're driven by one primary need, security. The book says this comes from a place of fear, the fear of not being able to pay the bills, of economic uncertainty. So to feel safe, they want a steady paycheck as an employee, or they want total control as a self-employed person because, control feels safe. But on the right side, it's the complete opposite. People over here are driven by the search for freedom. We're talking financial freedom, time freedom, the works. They're willing to walk through the uncertainty and risk that terrifies the people on the left side, because the payoff, a life where you don't have to trade your precious time for money, that's the ultimate goal. And this chart just lays it all out, plain and simple. Left side values security, so they have a do-it-yourself attitude because they are the system. The right side values freedom, so their whole game is about building a team and owning the system. And look at the tools they use. The right side uses leverage, other people's time and other people's money. Meanwhile, the people on the left side, well, they're often the other people whose time and money is being used. Now, to really make this difference between doing it yourself and building a system stick, the book tells this brilliant little story. It's an analogy that perfectly explains the difference between working for money and building systems that make money for you. Think of it as the story of the pipeline. So, picture this. A village needs water. The first guy, let's call him Ed, he grabs a couple of buckets and just starts running back and forth to a lake that's a mile away. He works like crazy, sun up to sundown. And yeah, he makes money. The more buckets he hauls, the more cash he gets. He has a job, and his income is 100% tied to his own effort. But then there's a second guy, Bill.
Bill kind of disappears for a while. Instead of grabbing buckets, he's writing a business plan, he's getting investors, and he spends a year building this massive pipeline from the lake all the way to the village. And once that thing is built, water flows 24/7, and so does the money, whether Bill is there working or not. So the lesson is crystal clear, isn't it? Ed, our guy on the left side of the quadrant, he's hauling buckets. He owns a job, and he spends his life working in the system. If he gets sick or goes on vacation, the money stops. But Bill, on the right side, he built a pipeline. He owns a system that works for him, and the money flows no matter what. He spent his time working on his system, not just in it.
And this whole idea, this difference between hauling buckets and building pipelines, it leads us to a totally new way of thinking about wealth. It's not about how big your paycheck is or how fancy your car is. Those are just bigger buckets. Real wealth, that's the pipeline, and it's measured in a completely different way.
And look at this. This chart tells the whole story without needing any words. For most people, that's the bar on the right, a whopping 80% of their income comes from a paycheck, from wages. It's bucket money. But for the rich, on the left, the whole thing is flipped on its head. Over 70% of their income comes from their assets in investments, from their pipelines. They're not just earning more, they are earning in a fundamentally different way. And that brings us to maybe the biggest mind shift of all. Wealth is not measured in dollars, it's measured in time. Here's the question. If you stopped working today, right now, how many days could you survive and still live your life the way you do now? That number, that's your real wealth. The goal isn't just to make more money. It's to build a pipeline so big that it covers all your expenses forever. That, right there, is financial freedom. So as we wrap this up, the whole point of this framework is to get you to think. Take a second and look at where your money comes from. Which of these 4 quadrants are you living in right now? And more importantly, where do you want to be? The path to get to the right side is completely different, and it all starts with changing how you think. And that leaves us with this one last really powerful question to chew on. When you get up and go to work every day, are you just hauling buckets, trading your limited, precious time for money? Or are you, even just little by little, building a pipeline that will one day give you freedom? It's a question worth thinking about long after this is over.
All right, let's dive into one of the most powerful financial ideas out there, coming straight from Robert Kiyosaki's legendary book. It's called the Cashflow Quadrant. It's a simple idea, but trust me, it's one that has totally changed the game for millions of people when it comes to how they think about money, work, and their future. So let me ask you something. Do you ever feel like you're just stuck on a hamster wheel? You're working harder and harder, but you look at your bank account and it just doesn't seem to be changing much? You live for Friday, just for that little break before the whole cycle starts over again. Well, if any of that hits home, you are in exactly the right place. So where does this all come from? Well, for Kiyosaki, it all started back in his childhood. He had this unique experience of being guided by 2 father figures, and they had completely, and I mean completely, opposite philosophies about money and life. On one hand, you had his poor dad, who was actually his biological father, a very smart, highly educated man. His advice was all about the traditional path. Go to school, get good grades, and find a safe, secure job. But then there was his rich dad, his best friend's father, and he had a totally different take. His advice was to build businesses and learn to become a successful investor. 2 dads, 2 completely different paths, leading to 2 wildly different outcomes. So how did Rich Dad explain these 2 completely different worlds? Well, he came up with this brilliantly simple tool, and he called it the Cashflow Quadrant. Okay, so here it is. At first glance, it looks super simple, right? Just a grid, 4 letters, E, S, B, and I. But please, don't let that simplicity fool you. This little grid, it maps out the entire financial world. Now here's the key thing to get. The quadrant isn't about how much money you make. Nope, it's all about how you make it, the source of your income. And believe it or not, every single one of us fits into at least one of these boxes. All right, let's kick things off on the left side of this quadrant. This is where, honestly, the vast majority of people earn their living. First up, we've got E for employee. This one's pretty straightforward, right? You have a job, you work for somebody else. The big value here, the thing that's prized above all else, is security. You're trading your time for a steady paycheck, maybe some benefits. Our entire school system, it's basically designed to prepare us for this path.
Okay, right below that, you have S. This stands for self-employed or small business owner. Think of your doctor, your lawyer, a freelance designer. You're the boss now, which sounds great, but here's the catch. You basically own your job. If you don't show up, if you don't work, the money stops. Dead stop. You're still in the business of trading your time directly for money. Okay, now for the fun part. Let's cross over to the right side of the quadrant. According to Rich Dad, this is where the magic happens. This is where you find real financial freedom. Why? Because it's not about working harder. It's about working smarter by building systems and owning assets.
So we've got B for big business owner. Now, what's the real difference between someone in the S quadrant and someone in the B? It's one word: system. A B doesn't just own a business, they own a system that runs the business. They could literally disappear for a year, come back, and find the business is doing even better. See the difference? They don't own a job, they own a money-making machine.
And last but definitely not least, we have I for investor. Now, in this quadrant, things get really interesting. You're not working for money anymore, at all. Instead, your money is working for you. You're using your capital to buy assets, things like real estate, stocks, pieces of other businesses, and those assets just generate more and more money. This is the promised land of passive income.
Okay, I know this can feel a bit abstract. ESBI, what does it really mean? Well, Rich Dad had this perfect little story that makes the difference between the left side and the right side totally crystal clear. So imagine this little village, and there's this guy, Ed. Ed gets a contract to supply the village with water. So what does he do? He grabs a couple of buckets and starts running back and forth to a lake a mile away, all day long. Sunrise to sunset, haul, haul, haul. And yeah, he's making money, but he's trading every ounce of his energy for that money. If he gets sick, if he takes a vacation, the money stops instantly. But there was another guy in the village, Bill. He got a contract too. But did Bill grab some buckets? Nope. In fact, Bill just disappeared for a while. What was he doing? He was writing a business plan, getting investors, and hiring a crew. He spent all that time building a pipeline from the lake to the village. And once that pipeline was built, whoosh, the water and the money flowed 24/7. It didn't matter if Bill was sleeping or on vacation. He didn't just find a better way to haul water, he built a system. And that right there, that's the whole point. That's the question you have to ask yourself. When you look at your financial life, what are you doing? Are you hauling buckets, trading your time and energy for money day in and day out? Or are you building a pipeline? So moving from being an employee or self-employed to being a business owner or investor, it sounds great, right? But here's the thing. It's not just about learning a new skill or changing your strategy. It's way, way deeper than that. It's about changing who you are at your core. Think about it. To make that leap, you've got to fight against everything you've ever been taught. You'll hear those voices, right? From family, from friends, maybe even inside your own head. Oh, that's too risky. What if you fail? Just play it safe. Get a good job. Money can't buy happiness anyway. That fear of failure, it's like a powerful glue that keeps people stuck on the left side of the quadrant.
You know, this is why, according to Kiyosaki, you see so many incredibly smart people who are just struggling with money. They get it intellectually. They've read the books, but they haven't developed the emotional muscle to handle risk, to push past that fear. The journey to the right side isn't just mental. It's emotional, it's spiritual, it's a total transformation. So why would anyone put themselves through that? Why take on all that risk and fear? Well, as Rich Dad would always say, it comes down to one thing: freedom. He believed you can never have true freedom in your life without first having financial freedom. That's the real goal here. And that brings us right back to you. This whole framework, this entire idea, it all boils down to one simple, powerful question. I want you to really think about this. Right now, today, which quadrant are you in? Where is your money coming from? And maybe the most important question of all, where do you want to be? Answering that, really answering it for yourself, well, that's the first step on the entire journey. Today, we're going to break down a framework that might just completely change how you think about money and your career. It's called the Cashflow Quadrant from Robert Kiyosaki.
It all kicks off with this pretty provocative thought. I mean, in a world where we're all taught that a safe, secure job is the ultimate goal, why on earth would anyone not want one? Well, that question is at the heart of a really dramatic story.
You see, back in 1985, this wasn't some abstract idea for the author and his wife. Their friends, their family, they were asking them this all the time, totally confused by what they were doing with their lives. And the reason everybody was so worried? Well, get this. They were unemployed, drowning in debt, and were literally, and I mean like literally, living out of the back of their old car. It was by far the worst time of their lives.
But here's the crazy part. This wasn't some story of failure. It was a choice, a deliberate and yet an incredibly painful choice. They weren't looking for a job. They were on a mission for something much bigger, total financial freedom.
And their comeback story is just staggering. In just 4 years, they went from that car to becoming millionaires. And by 1994, only 9 years after hitting rock bottom, they had made it. They were financially free and never had to work for money again.
So you have to ask, right? Why would two smart, college-educated people who could have easily landed high-paying jobs choose such a radical and, frankly, terrifying path? Well, the answer goes way back to the lessons they learned growing up.
The whole foundation for this way of thinking came from Kiyosaki's experience with 2 different father figures. There was his own dad, highly educated but always struggling with money, who he calls his poor dad. And then there was his best friend's dad, an entrepreneur who became his mentor, his rich dad. And the difference in how they saw the world was like night and day. His poor dad had these limiting beliefs, always saying things like, investing is risky, or I'll never be rich. But his rich dad, he saw money as a tool, something you learn to make work for you so you can be free.
So this leads to a really interesting question. If you don't need money to make money, and a traditional education isn't the secret, then what is the secret ingredient to becoming wealthy?
Well, according to him, it boils down to a few things. A big dream, a ton of determination, and being willing to learn really, really fast. But the most important piece of the entire puzzle, it's knowing which of the 4 quadrants is the right place for you to be earning your income. And that brings us to the main event, the cash flow quadrant. The easiest way to think of it is like a map that shows you the 4 basic ways that people can earn money in our society.
So at its core, the quadrant just shows the 4 different ways to generate income. And here's the key. While a dollar is a dollar, how you earn that dollar is wildly different depending on where you are on this map. Okay, so here it is. It's split into a left side and a right side. You've got the letters E and S on the left and B and I on the right. And trust me, that dividing line down the middle, that's everything. Let's break it down real quick. E is for employee, you have a job. S is for self-employed or specialist, you own a job. B is for a big business owner, you own a system and people work for you. And finally, I is for investor. This is where your money works for you. Now here is an absolutely critical point. The quadrant isn't about your profession. It's not about being a doctor versus being a janitor. It's all about how you generate your income. You see, choosing your quadrant is really about figuring out who you are. Some people value security above all else, so being an E is perfect for them. Others crave freedom and would feel trapped. It's about aligning how you earn with who you are. Let's use a doctor as an example because it makes it crystal clear. A doctor can be an E, an employee working for a hospital. They can be an S, self-employed by opening up their own private practice. They could become a B, a business owner, by owning a clinic and hiring other doctors to work for them. And they can be an I, an investor, by investing their profits in the stock market. Same profession, 4 completely different financial paths. Okay, so where does financial freedom fit into all this? It all comes down to the huge difference between the left side of this map and the right side. On the left side, as an employee or self-employed person, you are working hard for your money. Your income is directly tied to your time. If you don't work, you don't get paid. But on the right side, as a business owner or investor, you learn to make money work hard for you. You decouple your income from your time. And as the book points out, you often get way more legal tax breaks over there. And this quote just brings it all home. The reason Kiyosaki didn't want a job wasn't about being lazy. It was about refusing to spend his one life just trading his time for dollars. He wanted to break out of that trap. In the end, this whole framework wasn't just a clever theory for them. It was their literal map. It was the guide they used to move from the left side of the quadrant to the right, and from living in a car to living a life of true freedom.
So, this all leads to a really important moment of self-reflection. Just take a look at the quadrant and ask yourself honestly, where am I right now? Am I an E, an S, a B, or an I?
And that leads us to the final and most powerful question of all. Knowing what you know now about how each quadrant works, where do you ultimately want to be? Because according to this way of thinking, making that choice, well, that's the very first step toward changing your entire financial future.
Do you ever look around and wonder why some people seem to work way less but earn way more? Why financial security just feels easy for them, while so many others are struggling? Well, the answer isn't about working harder. It's about understanding this really powerful framework called the cash flow quadrant. And today, we're going to break it all down.
So what's the secret? It's not a better job, it's not longer hours. It's a complete shift in your financial mindset. It's about realizing that the path you choose to get your income is so much more important than the exact dollar amount you make. See, how you earn your money, that's the whole game.
Okay, so this whole idea comes from this great story about two dads. The first one, super educated, valued one thing above everything else, security. His whole life was built around finding a safe, steady job. But the second dad, the rich dad, he was chasing something totally different, freedom. He didn't see money as something you just hoard for safety. He saw it as a tool to buy that freedom. And that clash right there, security versus freedom, that's the key to understanding all of this.
And that brings us to the map itself, the cash flow quadrant. It's really simple. It just divides the world of earning money into 4 categories. Over on the left, you've got E for employee and S for self-employed. And on the right, B for business owner and I for investor. Where you are on this map pretty much dictates your entire financial life, not just your income.
Now, this is where it gets really, really interesting. You can almost always tell which quadrant someone's living in just by the words they use. The language we choose literally broadcasts our deepest values, our fears, and our entire mindset about money. Let's have a listen.
Hear those words? Safe, secure, benefits? That is the language of fear. The fear of not having enough, the fear of uncertainty. For someone in the employee quadrant, the main goal is to get rid of that fear. Security actually becomes more important than the money itself. And it doesn't matter if you're the janitor or the CEO of the company, if you're an employee, you're operating from that same core need for a secure contract.
Now, the self-employed person, they speak a different language entirely. They want to be their own boss, do their own thing. Their income is tied one-to-one with their own effort. They're often total perfectionists who truly believe nobody can do it better than me, which, by the way, is exactly why they struggle to delegate. For them, the core value is independence.
And this is a massive shift in thinking. A true business owner doesn't want to be the best person in the system. They want to own the system itself. Their mantra is basically, why should I do it when I can hire someone who can do it even better? They focus on leadership, on finding people smarter than they are, and that frees them up for the most important job of all, thinking. And finally, of course, we have the investor. Their language is pure numbers. ROI, cash flow, IRR. They've entered a world where money literally makes more money. They are no longer working for money, their assets are working for them. This, right here, is the playground of true financial freedom.
So, when you boil it all down, here's the fundamental divide. On the left side, you have a job. You're basically trading your time for money. On the right side, you own systems and assets that work for you. Think of it like this. People on the left are other people's time and money. People on the right use other people's time and money. Big difference.
All right, let me ask you a quick question. Be honest. Could you, personally, make a better hamburger than McDonald's? I bet almost everyone watching this is saying, yeah, of course. But here's the thing. That's the wrong question to ask.
Okay, so what about this one? Can you build a better business system than McDonald's? Suddenly, that's a much, much harder question to answer, isn't it? And that brilliantly shows the difference. Success on the right side of the quadrant isn't about having a better product. It's about building a better, scalable system that can deliver that product consistently to millions.
Okay, so we've got the 4 quadrants. But you might be wondering, why does this matter so much right now, today? Well, it's because the entire financial rulebook that our parents and grandparents lived by has been completely rewritten. That world is gone, and we have to understand the new rules if we want to survive, and better yet, thrive.
Back in the industrial age, the deal was simple. You give a company 40 years of your life, and they take care of you in retirement. But look at this timeline. Right around 1974, that deal started to crack. By the time the information age really got going, that deal was completely off the table. Today, the responsibility for your financial future is 100% on you. You can see this shift crystal clear in how retirement works. The old way was a defined benefit pension. The company guaranteed you a check for life. It was secure, predictable. Today, we have defined contribution plans, like 401ks. All the risk is on you. You only get out what you put in, and its value is totally at the mercy of the stock market. That guarantee is vanished.
So, what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, for the vast majority of people, a pretty staggering 80% of their income comes directly from a paycheck, from the left side of that quadrant. What that means is their entire financial life is tied to their ability to show up and work. If that job goes away, so does their income.
But now, flip that coin over and look at the rich. The whole picture is inverted. A full 70% of their income is flowing from their investments, from the I quadrant. They aren't living off their labor, they're living off their assets. Their money is doing all the heavy lifting, not their time. This isn't just a small tweak, it is a completely different financial reality.
And all of this forces us to redefine what wealth even means. Real wealth isn't some number in your bank account. It's time. It's simply the number of days you could stop working right now and still maintain your current lifestyle. So the question to ask isn't how rich am I? The real question is, if my paycheck stopped tomorrow, how long could I survive?
So, at the end of the day, it really all boils down to a choice. Moving from the left side of this quadrant to the right, it's not easy. It takes new skills, it takes a new mindset, and it takes a refusal to quit when things get tough. Financial freedom is available to anyone, but it's not free. It has a price. And the only question left is, are you willing to pay it?
So let me ask you something right off the bat. Are you on the path to job security or are you on the path to financial freedom? It's a huge question because as we're about to see, those two roads, well, they often lead to completely different places.
I mean, really think about it. Since we were kids, right, most of us have been guided towards one very specific goal. It's this deeply ingrained idea, almost like financial programming, that millions and millions of us follow, a lot of times without ever stopping to question it.
And you know the script. We all do. Go to a good school, get great grades, and then land that safe, secure job with all the benefits. On the surface, it sounds totally sensible, doesn't it? But what we often don't realize is that this path usually comes with a pretty heavy hidden cost, a lifetime of debt that keeps you chained to that safe job.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to tackle that core conflict, security versus freedom. Then, I'm going to introduce you to a really powerful concept called the cash flow quadrant. After that, we'll dive into the hidden traps of a typical job, explore the real paths to financial freedom, and wrap it all up with a clear, recommended first step you can start thinking about.
You know, this whole conflict, it usually starts with the advice we get when we're growing up. In Robert Kiyosaki's famous story, he had two major father figures. One was his highly educated biological dad, who was all about job security. But the other, his rich dad, focused every single lesson on one thing: achieving financial freedom.
And this right here gets to the absolute heart of it. It's all about what drives us. The advice to get a safe job is fueled by a deep desire for security. But the advice to learn to build assets is fueled by a desire for freedom. These two mindsets don't just lead you to make different choices with your money. They literally shape two completely different lives.
All right, so let's dive into the core framework that really helps make sense of all this. It's called the cash flow quadrant, and it's a brilliantly simple but incredibly powerful way to visualize where your money actually comes from. And I want to be super clear about this. This has nothing to do with being rich or poor. It's not about how much money you make. It's all about how you make it. And that little distinction, well, it changes everything. So here it is, the whole quadrant. On the left side, you've got E for employee. Pretty straightforward. You have a job. And S is for self-employed or small business owner. Basically, you own your job. The catch here is if you stop working, the money stops coming in. Now, on the right side, we have B for business owner. You don't own a job. You own a system that works for you. And finally, I for investor, where your money works for you. So just take a quick second and think, which one of those quadrants are you in right now? Okay, so now let's talk about why sticking to just the left side of this thing, the employee and self-employed boxes, can be a real trap, even for people who are successful by traditional standards.
So first up, there's this nasty cycle of debt. You've seen the story play out, right? A couple gets jobs, they get married, and they buy a house with a big mortgage. Then they get a raise, so what do? They buy a bigger house, a fancier car. The problem is their expenses always seem to rise right alongside their income. They get completely trapped, needing that job security just to keep up with their ever-growing pile of bills.
And then you've got what's called the success trap. And this is where it gets kind of ironic. For a successful employee, a promotion means more work, more stress, more responsibility, and, more often than not, less free time. But for a successful business owner over on the right side, success means their system is working so well it can run without them, giving them more money and more free time. See the difference?
And finally, let's talk about the money trap itself. As an employee, it's a simple, brutal formula. The more you make, the more you pay in your two biggest expenses, taxes and interest on your debt. Every single pay raise bumps you into a higher tax bracket. And what's the typical advice you get? Buy a bigger house for the tax deduction, which just means taking on even more debt. It's a vicious, vicious cycle.
I mean, for a lot of folks in that E quadrant, it's almost like the government is your 50-50 business partner. A partner who, by the way, takes their cut right off the top, before you even get a chance to touch your money. It makes getting ahead feel almost impossible.
But see, people on the right side of the quadrant, they play a completely different game. The sequence is flipped on its head. First, they earn money. Then they immediately reinvest it to grow their assets. And only then, way at the end, do they pay taxes on whatever is left over. The legal tax advantages they have are just massive.
Okay, so knowing all of this, how in the world do you actually break out of these traps? How do you make that leap from the left side to the right? Let's look at the different paths people try to take.
Now, a really common move people make is jumping from employee to self-employed. They want to be their own boss, right? But, and this is a huge but, this is often the single riskiest step you can take. A shocking 99% of these small businesses fail within 10 years. And it's not always a lack of money. It's often just sheer burnout because the owner ends up working harder than anybody.
A much smarter path is the one to what's called financial security. And this is key. It's about having a foot on both sides of the quadrant. Picture a firefighter who works her shifts as an employee, an E, but on her days off, she's a professional investor, an I, building a portfolio of stocks or rental properties. Now that is real security, having knowledge and income flowing from two different quadrants.
And that brings us to the ultimate goal, the holy grail, right? Financial freedom. This is the point where your income is flowing from the right side of the quadrant. Your business system runs without you, your investments are generating passive income, and you are no longer required to trade your time for money. You are, for all intents and purposes, truly free.
All right, so this all sounds amazing in theory, doesn't it? But how do you actually do it? What's a real, practical, and frankly, safer way to get started? Let's break down that first step.
So here's the recommended path. And listen closely, because it might actually surprise you. The advice is not to quit your job tomorrow. No way. The idea is to first get really good on the left side. Use the stability of your employee or self-employed income to build a real business system, a B quadrant business. Then, once that business is churning out cash, you use that profit to become an investor in the I quadrant.
So why this order? Why build a business before you start investing heavily? Well, it's because building a successful business gives you two critical things that most people who jump straight into investing just don't have. One, real-world education, and two, a significant stream of cash flow. You learn how businesses actually work, and you have capital to invest that won't totally wipe you out if or when you make a mistake.
At the end of the day, it really all boils down to this one powerful idea. Your financial future isn't decided between 9 and 5. It's decided by what you do with your paycheck and what you do with your free time after work. Do you spend it, or do you use it to build assets on the right side of the quadrant?
So, I want to leave you with one final question to really chew on. Your boss's job is to give you a paycheck. Simple enough. But whose job is it to make you rich? That responsibility, well, it belongs to one person and one person only. And that's something worth thinking about.
All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling a really powerful idea from Robert Kiyosaki's work. It's all about making that critical shift, from just working for a living to actually owning a system that works for you. It's a huge change in mindset, and it can completely change your financial future. So let's kick things off with the one question that gets right to the heart of this whole thing.
So think about it for a second. Is your work part of someone else's system, or are you the one who owns the system? See, most of us are trained from day one to just be a cog in someone else's machine, a good employee in their system.
The goal we're exploring today is how to flip that, how to become the person who owns the machine itself. So if that's the goal, what exactly is this machine or system we're even talking about?
I love this metaphor from the book. A business system isn't just a company, it's a bridge. It's the thing that gets you from one side of the river to the other. From the left side of the quadrant where you're an employee or you're self-employed, constantly trading your time for money, over to the right side where you're a business owner or an investor and your assets are the ones doing the work for you. It really is your bridge to financial freedom.
Now, here's the best part. You don't have to be some kind of engineering genius and invent a whole new kind of bridge from scratch. Turns out there are 3 really well-traveled paths you can take to get across to the other side.
And here they are, plain and simple. First, you can build your own system from the ground up. Second, you can buy a system that's already built and proven to work. And third, you can join a system that's already in place and build your own business inside of it. Let's dig into what each of these really means.
All right, let's start with path number 1. And we're starting with the big one. This is, by far, the most challenging route of all, creating your own business system from nothing. This is the classic entrepreneurial journey that we all picture.
So what makes this so incredibly tough? Well, you're juggling 2 massive, unpredictable things at the same time. You have to build a working system, and you have to find the right people to run it. Think about it. If either the system is flawed or the people aren't right, the whole thing just sinks. Kiyosaki even talks about his own early failures, like a nylon and Velcro wallet company that just completely flopped.
And this quote just perfectly captures the mindset you need for this path. You have to see failure completely differently. It's not the end. It's more like paying tuition. Every single failure is a lesson that gets you one step closer to figuring out what does work. It's just part of the process, not a sign that you should quit.
Now, while you're on this tough journey, the source material points out a crucial distinction, something a lot of people miss. You need a guide, right? But there's a world of difference between a mentor and an advisor. An advisor might have a fancy degree and can tell you how to do something in theory, but a mentor has actually been there and done that. They've walked the path. They give you wisdom from real experience, not just from a textbook. So if building that bridge from scratch sounds, well, totally exhausting, there's another way. Path number 2 is all about buying a bridge that's already been built and tested. Yep, we're talking about the world of franchising. The real beauty of a franchise is that it takes one of those huge, scary variables completely off the table. The system part? It's done. It's been designed, tested, and perfected. Your job isn't to create the system. Your job is to find and develop the right people to operate within that system. You're not trying to reinvent the Big Mac. You're just executing a process that's proven to work millions of times over. Of course, buying a proven system, well, that's not going to be cheap. Not by a long shot. When Kiyosaki's Rich Dad was selling franchises, he was talking about a price tag of around $250,000. Now that number can vary, of course, but the point is, this path requires some serious capital right up front. So who is this path really for? It's pretty clear. It's for people who look at all that trial and error, all the risk and failure of building from scratch and say, you know what? No thanks. I'd rather just pay for a system that I already know works. But, and this is a really big but, there is a catch. To succeed with a franchise, you cannot be a maverick. You can't be that person who always wants to do their own thing. You are literally paying for the system because it works. The second you start trying to change it, you're breaking the very thing you invested all that money in. So if you're fiercely independent and hate being told what to do, this is probably not the path for you.
Okay, so that brings us to our third and final path. And this one's really interesting because it completely shatters that huge financial barrier to entry we just saw with franchising.
This is the world of network marketing, and the way it's framed here is like buying a personal franchise. You're plugging into an existing, proven system with products, processing, all the back-end stuff handled for you, but at a tiny fraction of the cost.
I mean, just look at that contrast. We're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars anymore. We're talking, what, often less than $200 to get started? That's a game changer, right? It basically opens the door to the business owner quadrant to pretty much anyone who's willing to do the work, no matter how much they have in their bank account. Now, here is where it gets really fascinating. The advice on how to choose a company is don't focus on the product. I know, that sounds totally backward, right? But the argument is that the real value isn't the thing you're selling, it's the education the company provides. The best systems aren't really designed to move products, they're designed to build you.
So what does that development actually look like? Well, this path basically forces you to learn some of the toughest, most valuable skills in business. You have to learn how to overcome your fear of rejection. That's huge. You have to stop worrying so much about what other people think of you. And maybe most importantly, you have to learn how to lead people. These aren't just nice-to-have skills. They're absolutely priceless for any entrepreneur.
So there you have it, the 3 bridges to get to financial freedom. The big question now is, which one is the right one for you?
This table just lays it all out so clearly. You've got build your own, super high cost in both time and money, and the key skill is pure resilience. Then there's buy a franchise, high cost in money, and the main skill is just being able to follow a system. And finally, join a network, low financial cost, but the primary challenge is your own personal growth. And you see that common thread? No matter which bridge you cross, the ultimate skill you have to develop is leadership.
And that's really the bottom line. The system, whether you build it, buy it, or join it, that's just the vehicle. That's the bridge. Your real job, your most important job, is to become a leader who can develop other people. And that development always has to start with you. The first and most important person you will ever lead is yourself.
And that leaves us right here with this final question. Build it, buy it, or join it. 3 bridges, all leading to financial freedom. The only question left is, which one will you choose to cross?
Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to break down Robert Kiyosaki's really powerful framework for understanding how wealth is actually built. It's called the 5 levels of investors, and you can think of it as a roadmap, charting the entire journey from financial struggle all the way to true financial freedom.
Does this sound familiar? Investing is risky. It's something so many of us hear, right? Maybe from our parents or from friends. Kiyosaki labels this the poor dad mentality. It's a mindset that's totally rooted in fear, and honestly, it keeps a lot of people just sitting on the sidelines, terrified to even get in the game. But then, here's the flip side of that coin. This is the rich dad perspective. The argument here is that the risk isn't really in the stock market or in real estate. No, the real risk, the real danger, is being financially uneducated. It's not knowing the rules of the money game that makes it so risky. And the stakes? They are incredibly high. According to Kiyosaki, if you choose not to invest, or you do it without any real knowledge, you're heading for a pretty predictable life, working hard forever, constantly worrying about bills, and always depending on someone else, your family, your boss, the government. It's a life where your bank account literally defines what you can and can't do. And the biggest cost of all, never knowing what true freedom really feels like. So how in the world do you beat that risk and escape that life? Well, you start by understanding that investing isn't just this one-time thing. It's a ladder. It's a ladder you can actually climb, and each step up is a step up in your education and your results. And this is the ladder. We've got 5 distinct levels here. We start at the bottom with 0 financial intelligence, and we go all the way up to the top, to the capitalist. So let's walk through each one of these so you can see where you might be right now, and more importantly, where you can go. But before we start climbing, let's look at where we're headed. What's the goal? Rich Dad used the game of Monopoly to teach the super simple but profound formula for wealth. 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel. Now, the point isn't just about buying property. It's about acquiring assets that produce consistent passive cash flow. That right there is the engine of financial freedom. Okay, now let's start at the very bottom. These first 3 levels are where the vast majority of people get stuck. These are the common traps that unfortunately stop them from ever building any real lasting wealth. So at the very bottom, level 1, these people, simply put, have nothing to invest. And it's not always about how much they earn. I mean, a lot of people in this category make great money, but they spend even more. They pile up bad debt, not assets, and they're often just one unexpected bill away from a total financial disaster. Now, moving up just one step, we find the savers. These are the people who do exactly what they were told. They put their money in the bank, thinking that saving cash is the safest, smartest thing to do. But Kiyosaki argues this is a dangerously old-fashioned idea. So why is that? This slide tells the story. Back in 1971, the rules of money completely changed when the US dollar was taken off the gold standard. Since that day, because of inflation and money printing, the dollar has lost almost all of its buying power. So savers aren't actually protecting their wealth. They're parking their money in an asset that is literally designed to become worthless over time. And that brings us to level 3, which is full of highly educated, successful professionals. Doctors, lawyers, engineers, you name it.
These are the people who say, you know what, I'm just too busy with my job to learn about investing. So what do? They turn their entire financial future over to so-called experts and just hope it all works out.
And that hoping for the best usually means dumping money into things like a 401k. But Kiyosaki is ruthless in his critique of these plans. He points out that hidden fees can just gobble up your profits, your gains are taxed at the highest possible rates, you have zero insurance against a market crash, and the whole system is based on the wild assumption that you'll somehow be poorer when you retire. Think about that.
And this classic quote from Warren Buffett just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It shines a bright light on this huge potential conflict of interest. Are the advisors you're trusting with your life savings really on your team, or are they just salespeople earning a commission? It's a crucial question. So if the bottom rungs are all about giving away control and hoping for the best, the top rungs are all about taking control back. Now we're making the leap to the professional and the capitalist. This is where active wealth creation happens. This is where true financial freedom is built. Level 4 investors, they stop outsourcing their future. They become do-it-yourselfers. They take full control, they commit to being lifelong students of finance, they do their own homework, and they make their own educated decisions. And yeah, they'll make mistakes, but those mistakes become their most valuable lessons.
And finally, the pinnacle of the ladder. Level 5, the capitalist. This person isn't just an investor anymore. They're a business owner who literally creates investments on a massive scale. They build entire systems that don't just make money. They actually attract other people's money to help fund their projects.
So what's the real difference between these top two levels? It comes down to one word: leverage. This slide shows it perfectly. The level 4 professional is mostly using their own money. It's hard work. But the level 5 capitalist, they build a lever using what's called OPM, other people's money. They put together a brilliant team and they create systems so successful that capital just comes to them.
You know, understanding these 5 levels isn't just some interesting theory. It's about empowering you. It gives you a map so you can look at where you are and then consciously, intentionally choose your own path forward.
And the key to climbing this ladder isn't just about return on investment. It's what Kiyosaki calls return on information. This totally flips conventional wisdom on its head. He says the more you know, the higher your returns can be, and get this, the lower your risk becomes. Your financial education is your single greatest asset.
And all that education leads to the ultimate prize for a sophisticated investor, an infinite return. This is the real secret to how the rich get richer. It's the skill of setting up a deal where you get all your initial money back out, but you still own the asset that's making you money. Think about it. You buy a rental property, and then you refinance it to pull out your original down payment. Now you have zero of your own money in the deal, but you're still collecting rent checks every single month. That's an infinite return.
So, as we wrap this up, it's time for a little moment of truth, a little honest reflection. Looking at these 5 levels we've just gone through, where do you see yourself standing today? Are you a saver, a busy professional, a do-it-yourselfer? And that leads us to the most important question of all. Where do you want to be? Because the simple act of deciding, of choosing your destination, that is the first and the most powerful step you can take on the path to achieving real financial freedom.
So, let's dive into a single, powerful idea that could honestly change how you look at every financial decision you ever make. And it's this: you don't see money with your eyes, you see it with your mind.
Just think about that for a second. When you're looking at a deal, any kind of deal, what makes you go, yep, that's it, that's a good one? What are your personal green flags? Is it how something looks? You know, the beautiful new kitchen in a rental property? Is it the slick presentation from a broker? Or maybe a hot tip from a friend? We focus on these things, but they're often the very things that can lead us completely astray. To really get this, we're going to look at a story from our source material. It takes us all the way back to 1974, where a young investor was about to learn a lesson that would eventually make him millions. But yeah, it all started with a pretty huge mistake, a decision he made based completely on what he saw with his eyes. Okay, so picture this. We're in Waikiki. The deal? A 2-bedroom condo for $56,000. Now, to this young investor, it looked absolutely perfect. It was real, it was tangible, a cute little unit he was sure he could rent out in no time. He was totally fired up, thinking he just stumbled upon a fantastic deal.
But when he proudly took this great deal to his mentor, well, the reaction wasn't quite what he expected. His mentor looked at the numbers for maybe a minute and then just asked this one simple, devastating question.
And here was the reality of the situation. The young guy thought, okay, I might be losing $100 a month. I can handle that. But his mentor's quick math showed the real loss was closer to $150. He was about to buy something that was actively bleeding him dry every single month.
So why on earth would he even consider it? Well, his logic was based entirely on what his eyes and his emotions were telling him, not on the actual financial facts. The unit looked nice. A salesperson told him not to worry. He was caught up in that classic fear of missing out. These were all just opinions, not numbers.
And this is where the big lesson really begins. His mentor explained that the physical property, the thing you can see and touch, that's actually the least important part of the deal. The real investment is found in all the things you can't see.
Think about it like this. Your eyes see the building. They see the paper stock certificate. But your mind, that's what has to see the invisible stuff, the architecture of the deal itself, the financial agreement, the market trends, the tax laws, and, yeah, most importantly, the cash flow. That's where the money is really made or lost.
And here's the stark reality of it, right from the source material. An estimated 9 out of 10 investors fail to make any real money for this exact reason. They invest with their eyes, they invest with their emotions, they fall in love with a property and just completely ignore what the numbers are screaming at them.
So, the lesson here wasn't just to walk away from a bad deal. Not at all. The real lesson, the pro-level move, was about how to take a bad deal and, using your financial intelligence, turn it into a good one. It's about creating value, not just trying to find it.
So here's exactly how the turnaround happened. First, he went back to the seller and reopened the negotiations. Now pay close attention to the second step. The price stayed exactly the same. He didn't argue about the 56 grand. Instead, he focused on number 3, changing the terms. You know, the interest rate, the payment schedule. He changed the invisible parts of the deal. And the difference was just staggering. The first deal was a liability, a total money pit. But by simply changing the terms, the exact same property went from losing money to making $80 a month in positive cash flow. It went from a financial drain to the foundation of a real business. How many could he afford now? As many as he could get his hands on.
And here's the payoff. A few years later, when the market in Waikiki just skyrocketed, he didn't have just one property doubling in value. No, because he had learned how to create a good deal out of a bad one, he had 7. That's the power of seeing with your mind.
You see, that whole condo story is the perfect real-world example of one of the most fundamental concepts in finance, the difference between an asset and a liability. And understanding this simple distinction, well, it changes everything.
It really is this simple. If something is putting money in your pocket, it's an asset. If it's taking money out of your pocket every single month, it's a liability. That's it. It doesn't matter what your neighbor calls it, what a salesperson calls it. The only thing that matters is which way the cash is flowing.
And this brings us to a huge, kind of controversial idea. We are all told from day one that our house is our biggest asset. But hold on. If an asset is supposed to put money in your pocket, is your house really an asset?
Let's just look at it from 2 sides. On your personal balance sheet, your mortgage is a liability, right? It takes money out of your pocket every month. But on the bank's balance sheet, that very same mortgage is listed as an asset because it's putting money into their pocket every month. So when your banker says your house is an asset, they're not lying. It is. It's just not your asset. It's theirs.
And this all leads us to the final and maybe the most critical lesson of all. To be successful, you have to learn to tell the difference between a financial fact and what's just a popular opinion.
I mean, we hear these things our entire lives, right? They get repeated so often they start to sound like gospel truth. Diversify. Play it safe. Real estate always goes up. But these are opinions, folks, not guarantees. And building your financial future on opinions is like building a house on sand.
See, opinions are everywhere. They're loud, they're convincing, but the facts are quiet. They're found in the black and white numbers on a financial statement. A financial statement doesn't have an opinion. It just tells you the absolute truth about which way the money is flowing.
This completely flips the script on what risk really means. Investing itself isn't risky. You know what's risky? Being uneducated is risky. The danger comes from playing a game where you don't actually understand the rules, where you can't read the scoreboard, and you can't tell a good deal from a bad one.
Ultimately, the entire financial system, the whole shebang, can be boiled down to one simple question. Who is indebted to whom? The more people you owe money to, the poorer you are. The more people who owe you money, the wealthier you become. According to the source, that really is the entire game.
And that leaves us with one final question to ask ourselves. When you look at your own finances, your mortgage, your car loan, your credit cards, your savings, who is indebted to whom? And in this great game of money, whose team are you really playing on?
You know, we often think that going from a steady job to being your own boss is all about business plans and finding investors. But what if the biggest hurdle isn't out there in the world, but inside your own head? Today, we're going to dive into a story inspired by Robert Kiyosaki's journey, and it reveals that the real battle isn't for money, it's for the person you have to become to get there. So let's start with this. Imagine you're at your absolute lowest point. You're broke, you're desperate, and you're just about ready to throw in the towel. And then someone asks you this question. You can always quit. So why quit now? It's a simple question, right? But it really forces you to stop and think about what you're truly giving up on. And that really gets to the heart of it. Being broke, that's just a temporary situation. The real fight, the real war, is happening right between your ears. It's that part of you that's been trained for years to seek safety in a steady paycheck, battling against the part of you that desperately wants freedom and control. That's the journey we're really talking about.
To really get this, you have to understand what that price of freedom can look like. For Kiyosaki and his wife Kim, the journey to becoming business owners and investors, to getting on what he calls the right side of the cash flow quadrant, meant hitting rock bottom. We're talking homelessness, living out of their car, and just pure desperation. This wasn't just a financial problem, it was a test of their very character.
This piece of advice from his rich dad just completely reframed the whole struggle. Suddenly, it wasn't about whether they had a roof over their heads, it was about who they were becoming in the process. See, every single day you decide to keep going, you're forging one kind of person. But the moment you quit, well, you become somebody else entirely.
So what makes it so incredibly hard to keep pushing forward? What's this invisible force that's always trying to pull you back to that safe job? Well, according to Rich Dad, it's something that's as powerful as any drug, our addiction to a steady paycheck. Now that's a really powerful way to think about it, isn't it? When you're used to getting paid every 2 weeks, your brain just gets hooked on that rhythm. You feel great when the money comes in, but you get anxious and stressed when it doesn't. And that dependency makes it unbelievably hard to break away from the method you use to get it, which for most of us is a job.
And this addiction, it traps us in these predictable patterns. Kiyosaki breaks this down with his cash flow quadrant. On the left side, you've got the E for employee, someone who works inside a system, and the S for self-employed, who basically is the system. When they need more money, what's their first instinct? Work harder, work more hours. But on the right side, you have the B for business owner, who creates the whole system, and the I for investor, who puts money into other people's systems. To truly be free, you have to break those deep-rooted habits of the left side.
Which brings us right back to that critical moment. Picture this. He's standing at a payphone, totally out of cash, and he calls his rich dad for help. But instead of a handout, he gets a lesson that forces him to face these two huge forces that were just tearing him apart. He was in the middle of this intense internal war. On one side, you have fear. It's that primal voice in your head just screaming, "Forget this dream, just get a job, get a paycheck." But then on the other side, there's passion. It's that quieter voice, the one that whispers, "Hey, remember why you started this. Remember the mission."
And here is the absolute game changer. Rich Dad tells him, passion builds businesses, not fear. Think about it. Fear is all about survival. It's a defensive, shrinking energy. It will never, ever build a business. Only passion, that big, creative, expansive energy of your dream, can actually create something new from nothing. And that, well, that was the turning point.
So now he was forced to choose. He had to pick passion over fear. And to do that, he had to reconnect with his why. He had to remember what in the world got him into this crazy mess in the first place. And it turns out his passion came from a really interesting place, a mix of both love and hate.
As a kid, he swore he would never, ever be a teacher like his dad because he just hated the school system. He hated how rigid and boring it was. But here's the thing. He loved the act of learning. He just despised the institution of school. And that powerful conflict, that love/hate relationship, became the rocket fuel for his mission.
And you know, his own father, the one who was a big part of that traditional system, actually sent him these quotes for encouragement. From Churchill, Mark Twain, Galileo, they all confirmed he wasn't crazy for feeling this way. He realized he had his dad's passion for teaching, and he could combine it with his rich dad's knowledge of business to build a whole new kind of system.
So with that fire lit again, he didn't just survive. He and Kim started to build. They decided to create an education company that was the polar opposite of the system he grew up hating. And just look at this. It was totally revolutionary. Instead of boring lectures, they used interactive games. Instead of academics teaching theory, they brought in actual entrepreneurs and investors. And here's the brilliant part. The students got to grade the teachers. They flipped education on its head, turning it from this passive, competitive slog into something active, cooperative, and actually fun.
So did it actually work? Oh, you bet it did. In less than 5 years, this company that they built purely on passion, with zero advertising, grew into a multi-million-dollar business with 11 offices all around the world. It was absolute proof that a great system, when it's fueled by real passion, can just blow past fear and all that old programming.
Now, a story like this really makes you question our whole idea of what's safe, right? We're all taught that a job means security and starting a business is risky. But what if? What if that's completely backwards?
The difference in mindset here is just huge. People on the left side of the quadrant, the employees and the self-employed, they often operate on words, on opinions. And think about it, they pay to take risks by buying things like insurance. But people on the right side, the business owners and investors, they operate on numbers, on facts, and they actually get paid to take calculated risks. See, true security isn't in a paycheck, it's in control.
The key to playing on that right side of the quadrant is what Rich Dad called financial X-ray vision. It's basically the ability to read a financial statement to understand how systems work. It's like having a superpower. When you have this skill, the numbers become your eyes. You can see the reality of a situation, the facts, while everyone else is just guessing based on opinions. And that is what really lowers your risk.
And this all leads to this really powerful, kind of counterintuitive idea. Trying to hide in a secure job just to avoid risk is, ironically, the riskiest thing you could possibly do. Real, lasting security only comes from financial education and from building and controlling your own systems.
So, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that fear will always try to pull you back to what feels safe and familiar. But it's your passion that actually builds the future. So the real question this leaves us with isn't really about money, it's about purpose. What is that deep passion inside of you? That mix of what you love and what you want to change that you can build a system around.
You know, most of us think that getting rich is all about grinding away at a job or having some fancy degree or maybe a super complex stock-picking strategy. But what if the real secret is something we all picked up as kids?
What if that fundamental formula for building wealth wasn't hiding in some stuffy university textbook or on a chaotic Wall Street trading floor, but in a children's board game?
Yeah, you heard that right. That's the powerful idea we're going to break down today, coming from author Robert Kiyosaki. He actually claims he learned his most valuable financial lesson ever from playing Monopoly as a kid.
So, the whole idea here is that the path to real wealth is, believe it or not, surprisingly simple. It's a formula that's been hiding in plain sight for decades, right there on that colorful game board we all know.
And here it is. The secret to winning at Monopoly, and as it turns out in life, is this simple two-step process. First, you buy 4 greenhouses. You acquire these small, cash-flowing assets. Then, step 2, you trade them all in for one big red hotel. You consolidate them into a larger, way more powerful asset. And the author did this in the real world. He bought up small rental houses when the market was down, and then, when things got better, boom, he traded them for large apartment buildings. The cash flow from these real-life red hotels is what really created his financial freedom.
Okay, so that's the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? If the doing part is that easy, what's stopping everybody? And this right here brings us to the absolute core of this entire explainer.
Well, the argument is that the real barrier isn't the doing, it's the thinking. It all points back to that classic book, Think and Grow Rich. And notice the key detail. The title isn't Work Hard and Grow Rich. It's Think and Grow Rich. The change has to start on the inside with who you are first. So, this leads to the crucial be
do-have framework. Most of us, and I mean most of us, get it completely backward. We focus on what we need to do to have the things we want. Like a great body or millions of dollars. But the real path is to first be the person who can achieve those things. You have to change your thoughts, your mindset, your core beliefs before you even start taking action.
This slide just illustrates the problem perfectly. I mean, think about it. Going on a diet is a do action, right? But if you don't first be a healthy person in your mind, you're just going to go back to your old habits. Buying a set of expensive golf clubs won't make you a great golfer. And buying the exact same stocks as a pro won't make you rich if you have the mindset of a loser and you sell at the very first sign of trouble. The action is totally useless without the identity behind it.
So how does this mindset shift actually apply to our financial decisions? Well, it turns out that when it comes to money, our brains are not the cool, rational calculators we like to think they are. Not even close.
Citing the work of Daniel Goleman, the author makes this really striking claim. Your financial intelligence is a whopping 90% emotional and only 10% technical. It's not about knowing the numbers, it's about controlling your feelings about the numbers.
And to put that into perspective, check this out. The source quotes one writer who compares the power of the emotional brain to the rational brain at a 24-to-1 ratio. I mean, when our feelings are running high, like in a crazy, volatile stock market, our logic and reason barely stand a chance. And of all the emotions that can hijack our brains, one stands out as the #1 cause of financial struggle. Plain and simple fear. Specifically, that paralyzing fear of losing money. This one emotion dictates the thoughts and actions that keep most people from ever building real wealth.
So if fear is the enemy, how in the world do you win that fight? Well, it starts by changing the conversation you're having inside your own head. You literally have to rewrite your internal script.
This right here, this is the critical mindset shift. This is the whole ballgame. Successful investors and entrepreneurs don't see losing as some kind of catastrophe. They see it as an inevitable, even necessary part of winning. It's just feedback. It's just data. Like the slide says, it's just part of the game.
And just look at how this plays out in practice. A person with a loser's mentality, totally driven by fear, will sell a winning stock way too early just to lock in a tiny little gain. But they'll hold on to a losing stock forever, just hoping and praying it comes back. Winners do the exact opposite. They cut their losses quickly, and they let their winners run as far as they possibly can. The same emotion, fear, can trigger completely different thoughts. The emotional brain screams, "Play it safe, don't take any risks." But a trained, logical brain says, "Hold on, let's play it smart. How can we manage the risk?" One is a dead end. The other is a question that opens up a world of possibilities.
And this is so crucial. Your words create your reality. According to the source, phrases like "I can't afford it" or "I can't do that" are the language of fear. They literally put your mind in a cage, shutting it down and preventing you from ever seeing opportunities. Instead of saying "I can't," a rich mindset always asks, "How can I?" And this brings us to the ultimate goal, the true prize of the game. See, this whole journey isn't just about accumulating money, it's about a fundamental transformation of who you are.
I love this quote from the source material. It just perfectly captures the idea that the fear of failure keeps people small. To achieve anything great, anything at all, you have to be willing to take risks, to make mistakes, and yeah, to look a little foolish sometimes. Worms are safe, sure, but they never get to see the world.
And this is the final, most important takeaway. The struggle, the learning, the overcoming of fear, that whole process forges you into a more capable, more resilient, and freer person. That transformation, who you become, is so much more valuable than any dollar amount you could ever have in a bank account.
So, as we wrap this up, let's just reframe the entire question. Instead of asking, what do I need to do to get rich? Maybe the much better question to ask yourself is, who do I need to become? The answer to that question, well, it just might change everything for you.
You ever wonder why some people just seem to get richer no matter what the economy is doing? It's not always because they're smarter or working harder. Nope, it's because they're playing a completely different game with a different set of rules. Today, we're going to learn those rules. We're going to figure out how to be the bank, not the banker. Okay, so it all boils down to this one kind of wild idea. The rich don't just earn money, they literally create it. Now, I know that sounds impossible, maybe even a little crazy, but it's the central idea we're going to unpack right now.
But how? Like, how do you actually create money? It sounds like some kind of magic trick, but it's not. It's a system. It's a game with a very specific set of rules. And if you want to win that game, you first have to understand the board. You need the map.
And this is the map I'm talking about, the cash flow quadrant. It's a super simple way to divide the world into two main sides, and it's not based on how much you make, but on how you make it. Trust me, this simple diagram is the key to seeing what almost everyone else misses. So on the left side, you're basically on the hamster wheel. You're an employee or maybe you're self-employed, but either way, you're trading your time for a paycheck. The main driver here, security. Now look at the right side. Over here, you own the wheel. You're a business owner or an investor, building and buying assets that work for you even when you're sleeping. The driving force here is freedom. It's not just a different job, it's a completely different universe.
To really see how this plays out in the real world, let's jump in a time machine and look at a perfect case study. The year is 1986, and a single event is about to set off one of the biggest transfers of wealth in modern history.
It all kicked off with one piece of legislation, the Tax Reform Act of 1986. With just the stroke of a pen, the government basically eliminated the tax shelters that a lot of doctors, lawyers, and other high-income pros on the left side of the quadrant were using. And the dominoes just started to fall immediately. Real estate values cratered, panic started to set in, and just a year later, Wall Street itself came crashing down. For everyone on the left side, it was an absolute bloodbath. And here's the kicker. While all the people on the left side were losing their shirts, this exact same crisis was basically handing wealth over to the right side, often for pennies on the dollar. It was a massive, government-made transfer of wealth. So why did the left side get so completely wiped out? Well, they were just emotionally and financially unprepared. First, they panicked. They got blinded by fear. Second, they just didn't have the specialized financial know-how to see what was really happening. And third, and this one is huge, they didn't have a separate business, a cash machine to fund any moves even if they saw an opportunity. They were caught totally flat-footed. All right, so while the left side was panicking, what was the right side doing? Well, they used a very specific strategy that let them cash in on all that chaos. They didn't just invest, they basically became the bank. Let's walk through a super simple example. You find a house that's worth $100,000, but the owner is desperate to sell and lets you have it for $80,000. You put down just 10 grand and get a mortgage for the other 70. Now, here's the magic trick. You don't flip it. Instead, you sell it to another buyer for the full $100,000, but you offer to be their bank. They're going to pay you, not some traditional bank. In that one moment, you've created a brand new asset out of thin air, a $100,000 IOU that pays you every single month. And this just shows you the magic perfectly. Take a look at your balance sheet. You now have an asset, that $100,000 IOU from the buyer, and a liability, which is the $70,000 mortgage you still owe the bank. But the buyer, they only have a liability. You see what happened? You literally created an asset from nothing. And what's the bottom line? In that one simple transaction, you've created $20,000 in equity, completely tax-free. Now think about this. To save that much money, an employee would have to earn, maybe $40,000 before taxes? You just made it. This is what it means to create money. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that was the 80s, that's an old story. But here's the thing. The principles behind this are timeless. The economy changes, the markets change, but the actual game of money, driven by human emotions, it stays exactly the same. I mean, at the end of the day, markets are driven by two things, right? Greed and fear. People get greedy when things are flying high, and they get terrified at the bottom. The people on the right side of the quadrant, they understand this. They just wait for those predictable crashes to buy up assets from the left side. It's like Yogi Berra said, it's déjà vu all over again. But wait, the advantages don't stop there. Take a look at this, because it reveals one of the biggest and yet totally legal secrets of the wealthy, how they deal with taxes. For an employee, it's a one-way street. You earn your money, the taxman immediately takes his cut, and then you get to spend what's left. But for a business owner on the right side, oh, the entire game is flipped upside down. They earn money inside their company, and then they spend it on everything they can possibly call a business expense. The car, the trips, the meals, health insurance, you name it.
And only after all of that spending do they get taxed on whatever little bit is left over. This tiny shift in the sequence, I'm telling you, it is a financial superpower. So when you boil it all down, it really comes to a fundamental choice. And it's not really a choice between being rich or poor, but a choice between two core values that are going to guide all of your financial decisions. You can choose the well-traveled path of security, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you got to know the price you're paying. You'll almost certainly pay more in taxes, and you'll have a lot less control over your own financial destiny. Or you can choose the other path, the path of freedom. It's more challenging, for sure, but it requires learning a whole new set of rules, the rules of the right side of the quadrant. And that really just leaves us with one final thought. History tells us, over and over again, that these massive transfers of wealth happen in cycles. They've happened before, and you can bet they will happen again. So the only real question left is, when the next one comes, which side of the quadrant will you be on? Let's be real for a second. Have you ever had that feeling, that frantic urge to just fix all your money problems, like overnight? Well, we're going to dive into why that whole get-rich-quick idea is actually a trap. And the real secret to building wealth? It's all about taking baby steps. So let's get into it. So have you ever done this? You wake up, you look at your bank account, and you just decide, that's it, I am fixing everything, starting right now. You know, it's a lot like going on a crash diet. You go to the gym for 2 hours, you eat nothing but kale, and you feel absolutely miserable. And what happens? A week later, you're right back where you started. It's the exact same thing with money. We get this idea in our heads that building wealth has to be this huge, heroic leap. But honestly, that's what leads to burnout. Real, lasting financial success isn't about how big your first step is. It's all about consistency. Just taking one small, manageable step after another and making sure they're all pointed in the right direction. And that brings us to a really simple but incredibly powerful philosophy that's going to guide us through the rest of this explainer: the power of small wins, of baby steps. It sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? But trust me, it's a profound shift in how you can tackle massive goals. I know, we've all heard some version of this saying a million times, but I want you to stop and think about it as a practical strategy. This is the ultimate antidote to financial burnout. Instead of taking some giant leap that just leads to a crash and burn, you take one tiny step that you can actually keep doing. So when you're facing a goal that feels just impossibly huge, like getting out of a mountain of debt or trying to build real wealth, it can be totally overwhelming. It kind of feels like you're trying to eat an elephant. So the question is, how do you actually do it? The answer is so simple. One bite at a time. The moment you break a massive, scary task into tiny, manageable pieces, it suddenly feels doable. And that shift in perspective, that's the key to actually moving forward instead of just being frozen by overwhelm. Okay, this slide really breaks down the difference. Over on the left, you've got action. This is where you learn by doing. Yeah, you're going to make mistakes, but that's part of the process. Each one gives you real-world experience. But on the right, you've got inaction, and that's fueled by a fear of messing up, getting stuck in that I just need one more piece of information loop, what they call analysis paralysis. The big takeaway here, action, even if it's imperfect action, is always, always better than doing nothing. So taking small actions, that's the how. Now let's get into the why. We need to talk about the fundamental mindset of wealth. And this goes way beyond just your habits. It's about changing how you think about time and money itself. Now, what you're seeing here is pretty amazing. It's based on a study of people who actually went from having nothing to being wealthy. And they all shared these 3 key things. They had a long-term vision, they were masters of delayed gratification, and they used the power of compounding for them. Now, look at the other side. People who lost wealth had a short-term vision, they needed that instant gratification, and they let compounding, usually in the form of debt, work against them. The choice between these 2 paths couldn't be clearer. Okay, so this is all great in theory, but how do you actually apply it? Well, first things first, you need an honest look at where you are right now. And for that, we need a special kind of tool. I want you to think of a personal financial statement as being like a financial X-ray. It just cuts through all the noise, all the assumptions, and it lets you see the cold, hard facts of your financial health. It'll show you, right there in black and white, whether you've got what you might call financial cancer, or if things are actually strong and healthy under the surface. And it's simpler than you might think. It really all boils down to these 4 boxes.
Over on the right, you have your income statement. That's the money flowing in and out of your life right now. Then on the left, you have your balance sheet. That's the big picture. It shows your assets, and these are things that put money in your pocket, and your liabilities, which are the things that take money out. You put them together, and they tell the complete story of your money.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The way money moves between these four boxes, it tells a story. And that story almost always follows one of three basic patterns. And this is so important. It's these patterns, not how big your paycheck is, that actually determine whether you're getting richer or poorer. So let's take a look at the very first cash flow pattern. And remember, the focus here isn't on how much money is coming in, but on where it all goes. This is really the pattern of survival. Money comes in from a job, and it flows straight back out to cover the essentials, rent, food, taxes. The paycheck might hit the bank account on a Friday, but by Monday, after all the bills are paid, it's pretty much all gone. It's just a straight line from income to expenses, and there's nothing left over. All right, on to the second pattern. Now, this is the one that society often tells us is the goal, right? The middle-class dream. But as you're about to see, it's very often a trap. So here's how it works. A good, high-paying job brings in income, but then that income is immediately used to buy liabilities. And remember, liabilities are things that take money out of your pocket, like a mortgage, car loan, credit card debt, and those liabilities then create even more monthly expenses, which means you have to keep working that high-paying job just to keep your head above water. Sound familiar? This right here is the rat race. And that brings us to the third and final pattern. This is the one that actually builds real, sustainable wealth. This is how you get out of the rat race for good. The difference is so simple, but it's absolutely profound. The wealthy focus on their asset column first. They use their money to buy things that generate more money, things like businesses, rental properties, or stocks that pay dividends. So as you see, those assets create income, and that income is then used to buy even more assets. It becomes this powerful, self-perpetuating cycle of wealth, a true financial snowball. So the big question is, how do you change your pattern? How do you actually escape that rat race? Well, it's not about getting another degree or just memorizing some new information. It requires a fundamental re-education of how you think. The answer isn't just to work harder at your 9 to 5. It's to literally retrain your brain to see the world through the eyes of a business owner or an investor. Let me tell you a quick story about a banker who went through this exact transformation. So this banker, he was making a great salary, but he was always drowning in financial stress. In his first session, learning these new ideas, he was just lost, and you could see his own anxiety reflected in his confusion. But then, as you can see in step 2, the light bulb started to go on. He began to recognize his own self-defeating money patterns. By the third session, his confidence was through the roof as he learned the new rules of the game. And finally, in step 4, he took control, started building his asset column, and began writing a completely new financial story for himself. And that really gets to the absolute heart of it. So much of our struggle with money is actually rooted in anxiety. We get stuck in these mental and emotional loops that keep us running on that hamster wheel. To change your financial reality on the outside, you first have to break those old thought patterns on the inside. Look, your cash flow tells the story of your financial life up until this very moment. But the future? That's a blank page. The only question left is, what's your next chapter going to be? You don't have to figure it all out today. You just have to decide on your first single baby step. All right, let's just jump right in. We're going to unpack a pretty provocative idea from Robert Kiyosaki, and it's this. From a very young age, most of us are basically taught, or you could say programmed, to completely ignore our own financial well-being. It sounds a little dramatic, I know, but stick with me and let's see where this goes. So let me ask you this, and be honest. Does it ever feel like you're just spinning your wheels? Working harder and harder, but it feels like someone else is getting all the benefits? It's a super common feeling, and the argument here is that it's not an accident at all. It might actually be by design. So how does this even start? Well, it begins really early, with advice that sounds totally normal, even smart and responsible. We're kind of guided down this path that seems really safe, but as we're about to see, it's a path that's often set up to benefit other people and other institutions way more than it benefits us. Does that sound familiar? I mean, come on, that's probably the most common piece of advice any parent gives their kid. It's sold as the absolute blueprint for a good, successful life. And, on the surface, it makes total sense.
But hang on, because here's the next piece of the puzzle. And here's the other classic we've all heard a million times. The dream of owning a home is just, it's baked into our culture. We're told it's the foundation of building wealth. But when you put these two pieces of advice together, a very specific pattern starts to show up.
And that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? When you get that safe, secure job and you take out that huge mortgage for your so-called dream home, are you really the main person benefiting from all of your hard work? The source material we're looking at says, hey, maybe we need to look a little closer at who's really winning here.
This is what the source calls the programming trap. The idea is that by just blindly following this standard advice, we can get stuck on a financial hamster wheel. You know the feeling, running faster and faster, but not really going anywhere, all while our efforts is making a ton of money for other people.
So let's just break down exactly who you might be making rich. As an employee, your work makes your boss and the company's owners rich. As a debtor with a mortgage or a car loan, you're making the bank rich. As a taxpayer, well, you're making the government rich. And as a consumer, every single thing you buy is making some other business rich. When you see it laid out like that, it's pretty eye-opening.
So here's the punchline. Your entire financial life can accidentally become about building someone else's dream, funding someone else's asset column. You're the one putting in all the hard work, but you're on their financial fast track, not your own.
This table just lays it out so clearly you can't ignore it. Look at the flow. Every big financial move we're told to make, get a job, buy a house, pay taxes, go shopping, it puts you in a specific role. And in each role, you are actively making another entity richer. You're literally minding everyone else's business.
Okay, so if that's the problem, what on earth is the solution? It's not about quitting your job tomorrow or living in a tent. It's actually about a really simple but incredibly powerful shift in how you think. It's about finally figuring out what your own business is and then minding it. And here it is. This is the whole game right here. According to Kiyosaki, your business is not your job. It's not your profession. Your real business is your asset column. Simple as that. It's the stuff you own that puts money in your pocket, whether you show up to work that day or not.
And this is the fundamental difference in thinking. Most of us, we're taught to focus on our income, right? Our paycheck. We think, how can I get a raise? But the rich, they focus on their asset column. They're always thinking, how can I buy or build another asset that generates income? It's a totally different question.
And that's the core idea, plain and simple. Real financial progress only starts the moment you decide to shift your energy, your focus, and your extra money away from making everyone else wealthy and toward building up your own asset column.
So you're probably thinking, okay, I'm sold, I get it. But how do I actually do this? Where do I even start? Well, that's the great part. The source material lays out some very clear, very practical first steps you can take, like today. It all starts with two really basic things. First, you've got to know where you are right now. I mean, you can't plan a road trip if you don't know your starting point, right? That means you have to map out your current financial situation. Second, you need a destination. You need to set clear, concrete goals for where you want to go. Now, I know what this looks like. It looks like a boring form an accountant would use, but it's not. This is a personal financial statement, and it is the single most important tool you have. It's the map. It shows you exactly where your money is coming from and where it's going. It shows you your income, your expenses, your assets, and your liabilities. This is the thing that tells you the truth about whose business you've really been minding. So, once you've got your map filled out, you can set some short-term, one-year goals. And you can focus on two huge things. First, reducing the amount of money flowing out to other people by paying down debt. And second, increasing the money flowing in from your assets, even if it's just a tiny amount to get started. Every dollar counts. And then you can zoom out, start thinking about the bigger picture. What do you want things to look like in 5 years? This is where you get really specific. How much passive income do you want coming in every month? What kind of assets are you going to acquire to make that happen? Real estate, stocks, a side business. You get to decide. And that brings us right back to the beginning, to the big question. Now that you've seen how the game is often set up, and you understand that your true business is your asset column, the choice is yours. Are you going to keep minding everyone else's business, or are you ready, starting today, to finally start minding your own?
What if I told you that there's one single skill, just one, that separates people who constantly struggle with money from those who really build serious wealth? It's not about how much you make, believe it or not. It's all about learning how to control your cash flow.
This right here, this single idea is the key to everything. It's a really powerful and, yeah, maybe a little bit of an uncomfortable truth, but stick with me, because by the end of this, you're not only going to get what this means, you're going to have the tools to make sure you're the one others are working for.
All right, first things first. We have to completely dismantle a huge myth that keeps millions and millions of people totally stuck. It's this belief that a bigger paycheck is the magic bullet for all your financial problems. Let's just call it the more money myth. So many of us have been there, right? Thinking, oh, if I could just get that raise, all my stress would just melt away. But here's the reality. If the real issue is how you manage your cash flow, more money just pours gasoline on the fire. You get the raise, you upgrade the car, your whole lifestyle inflates, and suddenly you're in even deeper debt. See, the problem was never the amount of money. It has always been about control. Okay, now for the fun part. Let's pull back the curtain on how money actually works in the real world. To really understand the system, you have to know that for every single transaction, there are two sets of books. Now, this isn't anything shady or illegal, not at all. It's the fundamental secret of finance.
So, let's take a look at your financial statement. When you take out a loan, let's say a mortgage for your house, it shows up right here on your balance sheet as a liability. It's money you owe. Pretty simple, right? Well, that's only half the story.
Because here's the other side of that exact same coin. Your mortgage, the thing that is your liability, is simultaneously on your banker's balance sheet as an asset. The money you pay them every single month, that's their income. That is the secret of the two sets of books.
Just let that sink in for a second. For every single car loan, every credit card balance, every mortgage payment you have, you are an employee of the bank or the person who lent you that money. You are literally working hard day in and day out to make someone else rich. So the whole game is figuring out how to flip that dynamic. And that brings us to a really critical distinction. See, not all debt is created equal. Not all of it is bad. The key difference comes down to one really simple question. Who is paying for it?
Okay, think about bad debt. That's pretty much any debt you're paying for with your own sweat and blood. That credit card bill, the car loan, you go to work, you earn your money, and you pay it off. Simple. But good debt, that's the magic. That's debt someone else pays for you. The classic example is a mortgage on a rental property. The bank gives you the loan, sure, but your tenant's rent check covers that mortgage payment and hopefully leaves you with some profit. You've just used the bank's money to get an asset that puts money in your pocket.
So let's actually visualize how all this plays out, how these concepts create two completely different financial lives, what we call the rat race and the fast track.
This is the cash flow pattern for most people, the rat race. Your paycheck comes into your income column and boosh, before you can even blink, it's flowing right back out to cover your expenses and most importantly, to pay for all those liabilities, the mortgage, the car loan, the credit cards. By the end of the month, there's just nothing left to put in your own asset column. You're just running on that hamster wheel as fast as you can just to stay in the exact same place.
Now look where all that hard-earned money is going. Every single payment flowing out of the debtor's liability column flows directly into the creditor's asset column. Your debt becomes their asset. Your monthly payments become their monthly income. It's a brilliant system where their money is put to work for them by you. Okay, so now you get it. You see the system. The big question is, how do you get out of the rat race and onto the fast track? Let's get into the action plan, the step-by-step guide to financial freedom. Here it is, your 6-step plan to take back control. Step 1, and this is absolutely non-negotiable. Pay yourself first. Set up an automatic transfer for a percentage of every single paycheck into an investment account, and don't you dare touch it. Step 2, attack your debt. Find an extra $150, $200 a month, whatever you can, and focus it all on just one credit card. Step 3, this is where the magic happens. Start the snowball. Once that first card is paid off, you take the entire amount you were paying on it and you roll it onto the next debt. Step 4, keep that momentum going. You continue this process, and that snowball gets bigger and bigger until all your consumer debt is just gone. Step 5, now you go after the big guys. Apply that same massive monthly payment to your car loan and then your house. And finally, step 6, build your column. Once you're free, take that huge monthly amount that you were sending to other people and start investing it. You are now, finally, building your asset column, not someone else's.
So that's what this is all about. It really all comes down to this one question. Every time you spend money, every time you borrow, every time you get a paycheck, just ask yourself, is this action building my asset column, or am I just working hard to build an asset for somebody else? The choice, my friend, is yours.
So, what's the biggest financial risk you're taking right now? You might think it's the stock market, or maybe starting a business. But what if I told you the real risk is the very thing you believe is keeping you safe? Let's dive in and find out.
This quote right here, it just flips the entire script on everything we're taught about money. The idea isn't that investing is inherently dangerous. The real danger is going into it completely unprepared. You see, it's not the game that's risky. It's the player who doesn't know the rules.
And you know what? This is what most people, a staggering 90%, actually believe. We're told that investing is this big, scary monster under the bed. But the real question we have to ask is, what if this fear, this really common belief, is the actual trap?
Okay, so this brings us to a super crucial distinction, the difference between risk and being risky. They are not the same thing. Think of it like this. A race car, by itself, isn't dangerous. It's just a powerful tool. The danger only comes when an untrained driver gets behind the wheel. It's not the car, it's the person driving it.
Just look at these two paths laid out right here. It's pretty stark, isn't it? By the time they hit middle age, that 90% of people are basically trapped working for money because their liabilities are way bigger than their assets. For them, investing is a monster to be avoided. But then you've got the other 10%. For them, money is working for them. They don't see investing as the risk. They know that ignorance is the real danger. And this has nothing to do with luck. It's all about financial education.
So here's the bottom line. An investment is just a tool. In the hands of someone who's untrained, yeah, it can seem chaotic and dangerous. But in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing, it can be used to build something absolutely incredible. The risk isn't in the tool itself. It's all about the skill of the person holding it.
Okay, so you're probably asking, how do I get that training? How do I get skilled? Well, it all starts with understanding one simple but incredibly powerful secret, the secret of cash flow.
All right, listen up, because this might be the single most important definition in all of personal finance. It's so simple. An asset is anything that puts money into your pocket. That's it, period. The end.
And you guessed it, here's the flip side. A liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. Simple as that. It doesn't matter what your banker calls it or what your neighbor calls it. All that matters is which way the cash is flowing.
This is the core principle. Everything, and I mean everything, boils down to one simple question. Is money flowing in or is it flowing out? If you can answer that, you understand the most fundamental concept in finance.
Okay, let's put this to the test with the biggest purchase most people ever make, their home. Is it an asset or a liability? We're told our whole lives it's our greatest asset. But let's just look at the cash flow. With the mortgage, taxes, and maintenance, money is flowing out of your pocket every single month. So by our simple definition, that makes it a liability.
So once you really get the difference between assets and liabilities, you can move on to the next level, financial intelligence. And listen, this isn't about how much you earn. It's all about how smart you are with what you have. This is the ultimate question you have to ask yourself. And be honest. Who is smarter, you or your money? Are you telling your money where to go, or is it controlling you, just kind of vanishing as soon as it hits your account?
So many successful, hard-working people live on this tightrope, what the source calls the financial red line. Their income is high, but so are their expenses. They are one paycheck away from financial disaster. Now that's not security. That is the very definition of high risk.
And this right here, this might be the most radical idea of all. We're taught that a safe, secure job is the ultimate goal. But what if relying on a single paycheck that someone else controls is actually the riskiest position you can possibly be in? It leaves you completely dependent and financially fragile. Okay, so we've torn down a lot of the old ideas. What do we build in their place? Understanding the problem is one thing. Solving it requires a plan. So here are the simple, actionable steps you can start taking this week.
The very first step is just a mental shift. Ask yourself these questions honestly. After what we've just discussed, does relying on a single paycheck still feel safe? And doesn't spending time learning how to acquire assets that pay you start to sound like the least risky thing you could possibly do?
And that's the commitment. Not a lifetime, not another full-time job. Just 5 hours a week. That's less than an hour a day. It's a totally manageable first step for anyone who is serious about taking back control of their financial future. And here's how you can use those 5 hours. And look, you don't have to do it all. Just pick one. Read the business news. Listen to a financial podcast on your commute. The goal is to simply immerse yourself in the language of money. It's about shifting from a passive consumer to an active and educated student of finance.
We started with a question, and now we have the answer. The biggest financial risk isn't a bad investment. It's a lack of financial knowledge. The real choice isn't between safe and risky. It's between being educated and being unprepared. So the only question left is, what's your first step going to be?
All right, today we're going to dive into a really powerful and honestly kind of counterintuitive way to think about building wealth. This whole idea comes from the work of Robert Kiyosaki, and it's a mental shift that really separates the average investors from the ones who are truly, truly successful. I mean, you've probably asked yourself this before, right? Why is it that some people just seem to have this secret formula for investing? Well, it turns out it's not really a formula at all. It's actually a pretty profound shift in how they look at the entire world of money. And there it is. That's the big secret. And it goes against everything we're normally taught. Most of us spend our lives trying to avoid problems, especially financial ones. But this whole philosophy says that the wealthiest people out there, they actively hunt for them. So this brings us right to the heart of the investor secret. It's this fundamental difference between looking for problems and looking for answers. It sounds simple, but trust me, the financial implications are absolutely massive.
So, how does this whole problem-seeking mindset actually work in the real world? Well, we can break investors down into 3 really distinct types. And as we go through them, I want you to think about which one sounds the most like you right now.
Okay, so here's the quick breakdown. You've got your type C investors who basically just want an expert to tell them what to do. Then you have type B who are a bit more proactive. They're asking for answers. But type A, type A is playing a totally different game. They're out there hunting for problems. Let's dig into each one.
First up, the type C investor. This is someone with very little interest in their own financial education. They just want a magic bullet, Just tell me what to do. And the source material is pretty blunt about this. The probability of this type of investor getting rich is about the same as winning the lottery. Ouch.
Now, the type B investor. On the surface, this person seems a lot more proactive, right? I mean, they're asking all the right-sounding questions, but they're still just looking for easy, prepackaged answers. This often leads them to what you might call retail investments, things like mutual funds that are designed for the masses, not necessarily for getting the best possible returns. And that brings us to the type A. See, this investor isn't asking, what should I buy? They're looking for messy situations, a business that's in bankruptcy, a property in foreclosure. And why? Because they know that buried inside those problems are incredible opportunities for massive returns. We're talking anywhere from 25% all the way to infinity. So you can see this isn't just about what you do, it's about a fundamentally different way of thinking. It's about your mindset. So let's put these different approaches side by side and see how they really stack up. You can really see the progression here, can't you? Type C is totally passive, just waiting for instructions. Type B is definitely more active, but they're still a consumer of advice. They're looking for someone else to give them the answers, which means they're basically outsourcing all the strategic thinking. And wow, this slide right here perfectly illustrates the night and day difference between Type B and Type A. A Type B question is about a simple transaction, but a Type A problem, well, that's a complex situation that needs skill, knowledge, and a ton of creativity to unlock value that literally no one else can see. What's interesting is that this difference in mindset is actually kind of built into the system. The source material argues that financial laws often reward people who solve big problems, like building housing or creating jobs, with huge tax breaks. So the Type A investor learns how to leverage these roles, while pretty much everyone else just follows the standard path. Okay, so if Type A is the ultimate goal, how in the world do you actually get there? It's not just about flipping a switch in your brain, it's a specific path that requires building a whole new set of skills. So, interestingly, the path doesn't even start with investing. It starts with business. The idea is to first become a B, a business owner, so you can master problem solving on a smaller scale. A successful business doesn't just teach you the skills, it generates the cash flow and frees up your time so you can go find and solve those bigger Type A investment problems. You start small, you learn,
and then you scale up.
This is the mantra right here. For a type A investor, the word problem doesn't have a negative meaning at all. It's a signal. It's like a giant flashing neon sign pointing directly to a potential opportunity that everyone else is too scared to even touch. Now, here's a really important point. You're not locked into being just one type of investor forever. This is all about strategic mindsets. For example, you could be a total type A genius when it comes to real estate, where you're an expert, but then act more like a type B investor with stocks, where you might rely more on advisors. It's all about knowing where your strengths are.
All right, let's bring all this home. How do we go from all this theory to actual action and find your own financial fast track? Well, it really all comes down to just a few key principles.
I want you to think of this as your roadmap. It all starts with getting your own financial house in order. But the real secret sauce, the real accelerator here, is that last point. Forget about diversification for a minute. The real fast track is about focusing and becoming an absolute, undeniable expert at solving one specific type of problem. And that's really the final thought I want to leave you with. The very next time you run into a financial challenge or a messy, broken situation, your perspective is going to define the outcome. Are you going to see it as an obstacle to run away from, or are you going to see it as the exact opportunity you've been looking for all along?
You know, when you're talking about a huge goal like financial freedom, who you listen to, well, it can make all the difference in the world. We all need mentors to kind of show us the ropes. So today, let's dig into how the right, and yeah, even the wrong, guides can literally shape your financial destiny.
All right, so let me ask you something, straight up. Just take a second and really think about this. Who are the people guiding your financial choices right now? Is it your family, your friends, maybe your professional you pay, or someone you follow online? The answer to that question, it's way more important than you might think.
Author Robert Kiyosaki gives us this incredibly simple but powerful definition. See, a mentor's real job isn't to have every single answer. It's to cut through all the noise and point you to what actually matters. That idea of focus, that's the whole game.
Okay, so to really see this in action, we're going to dive into one of the most famous financial stories out there, Kiyosaki's experience with his two mentors. There was his poor dad, who was actually his biological father, a very highly educated man, and then there was his rich dad, his best friend's father. And right away, you see this huge split in what they thought was important. Poor dad believed the ultimate goal was a high-paying job, a bigger and bigger salary. But rich dad, he taught that a salary just makes you a really well-paid employee. The real goal, he said, was to build passive income. That's money that keeps flowing in, whether you're actively working or not.
And this difference, it leads to a completely different philosophy on life. I mean, you've probably heard live below your means 1,000 times, right? That was poor dad's mantra. Rich dad's was the exact opposite. He said, instead of shrinking your life down to fit your income, why not focus on growing your income to build the life you actually want? It's really a mindset of abundance versus a mindset of scarcity.
And this, right here, this is where the rubber really meets the road. When a paycheck came in, poor dad's first priority was to pay all the bills. Whatever was left over, that was for him. Rich dad insisted on doing the reverse. You pay yourself first by putting money into assets. And look, this isn't just some accounting trick. It's about fundamentally rewiring your brain to prioritize growth over just maintenance.
So how do you actually do this? Well, Rich Dad used a simple financial statement, just like this one, as his main teaching tool. It's designed to literally train your brain to see what he saw as important. The entire game is built around one single goal, which you can see right at the top. Get your passive income to be greater than your total expenses. And the only way to do that is to relentlessly focus on building up that asset column.
But here's the thing. Mentorship isn't just about finding perfect people to copy. Actually, some of the most powerful lessons you'll ever learn come from watching what not to do. It gives you a much more complete picture. This is what's called a reverse role model. Kiyosaki tells this story about a friend who made over $800 million and still somehow ended up bankrupt. He says he learned just as much from watching his friend's mistakes as he did from someone else's successes. Both kinds of lessons are just incredibly valuable. What's really fascinating is how their mindsets were even shaped by their spiritual beliefs. I mean, they were both spiritual guys, but they took the exact same famous saying and came to totally opposite conclusions. For poor dad, the love of money felt wrong,
like it was inherently evil. For Rich Dad, the real evil wasn't money itself, but the ignorance surrounding money.
Rich Dad even used prayer to teach financial lessons. Can you believe it? He would literally point to the liability column on a financial statement, the part full of car loans and credit card debt, and he'd say, "And lead us not into temptation." Then he'd point over to the asset column and say, "But deliver us from evil." His point was powerful. Building assets is what delivers you from the evil of being a slave to debt.
Okay, so we've seen how these two dueling mentors were just so powerful for Kiyosaki. But here's the most important part. This isn't just his story. This is a framework you can use to understand your own life and the people that you choose to surround yourself with. I mean, just think about this analogy for a second. It's so good. You would never, ever take advice on how to climb Mount Everest from someone who's never even left their couch, right? So why do we take life-changing financial advice from people who are stuck in the exact same spot we're trying to escape?
And at the end of the day, that's really the bottom line. In sports, in music, in any high-performance field you can think of, the best of the best all have coaches. They are actively looking for mentorship. Why on earth should business and investing be any different? Seeking out guidance is what the pros do. It is not a sign of weakness.
So, with all that in mind, let's take this from theory to action. We're going to walk through a super simple, but I'm telling you, incredibly eye-opening exercise you can do right now to really analyze your own circle of influence.
It's really simple. Step 1, list the 6 people you spend the most time with. Next, for each person, identify which of Rich Dad's financial quadrants they're in. Are they an E for employee, trading time for a paycheck? An S for self-employed or a small business owner? A B for a big business owner who owns a system? Or an I for investor, where their money is working for them? And finally, if you happen to know, just take a guess at their level as an investor. So here's an example. Kiyosaki puts his wife, Kim, as number 1 on his list. She operates as both a business owner and an investor, and he'd classify her as a very high-level investor. Okay, now it's your turn. Go ahead and do this for your own list of 6 people. Okay, I want you to actually pause and look at that list you just made, because this is the big, sometimes tough, takeaway from this whole exercise. The people on that list, their habits, their mindsets, their financial realities, that is a direct preview of where you're heading. They are your future.
When Kiyosaki did this for himself, he said it was a massive wake-up call. He realized he was blaming his coworkers for his own lack of progress. He saw that he was the one who needed to change, not them. See, this exercise isn't about judging other people. It's a mirror. It's about seeing yourself more clearly.
So all of this leaves us with one last, really crucial question. If the people you surround yourself with truly do shape your future, take a hard look at your circle. Are they pulling you toward the future you actually want? And if they're not, the real question is, who will you choose to guide you from now on?
Have you ever been so let down by a failure that you just swore, "That's it, I'm never trying that again"? Yeah, we've all been there. But what if I told you those moments aren't really endings at all? What if they're actually the beginning of something much better? We're going to dive into a really powerful idea from Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad philosophy, and that's how to take those painful setbacks and turn them into your greatest source of strength.
So, let's kick things off with this core concept. And look, this isn't just some nice-sounding platitude you'd see on a poster. It's a fundamental mindset shift. It means that disappointment isn't a dead end. It's actually a signpost, pointing you directly toward a crucial lesson you couldn't have possibly learned any other way.
But, finding that gem of wisdom, well, it means you've got to dig through some real pain first. That feeling of failure is raw, and it's what stops so many of us dead in our tracks. This next story, it gets right to the heart of that struggle.
So, picture this. When his mentor told him he had to learn sales, Kiyosaki struggled, and I mean badly. For 2 whole years, he was just terrible at his job. He was painfully shy and was literally always one bad day away from getting fired. He felt that sting of constant rejection day in and day out.
And while all this was happening, what do you think his first instinct was? To blame everyone and everything else, of course. The economy, the product, even the customers. But his mentor just cut right through all that noise with this one blunt diagnosis. And here's the key insight. The emotional pain of disappointment is so sharp that our first reflex is almost always to deflect it, to push it away onto anything or anyone else.
So, this all leads to a huge choice. A critical choice, really. We all face disappointment, that's a given. But what we do with it, well, that's what defines our entire path forward. Are we going to let it become this crippling liability, or are we going to forge it into a powerful asset? Let's break that choice down.
And this, right here, lays out the two paths so perfectly. On one side, you've got the liability mindset. That's the voice in your head that says, nope, never doing that again. It points fingers at everything else and builds this little protective wall to keep you from getting hurt. But then, there's the asset mindset. It asks a totally different question. Okay, what did I learn? It takes ownership and uses that mistake as the very foundation to build something bigger and better.
And this is the trap, isn't it? So many of us fall right into it. That protective wall, it feels safe, but in reality, it's a prison, and we're the ones who built it. It stops you from taking risks, from trying new things, and ultimately it starves you of the exact experiences you need to grow.
All right, so let's shift gears and talk about the first strategy for actually handling these setbacks. And it might be the most surprising one. It sounds a little negative at first, but trust me, it's an incredibly powerful mental tool. Now hold on, this isn't about being a pessimist or a total downer. It's about being a realist. When you mentally prepare for things to go wrong, you kind of vaccinate yourself against panic. So when setbacks inevitably show up, you can stay calm. And that calmness, that's your superpower. Because when you're calm, you can think. When you panic, your brain just shuts down.
Just think about it for a second. How many new projects start with this huge burst of excitement, only to fizzle out a few weeks later? It's almost never because the idea was bad. It's because the person wasn't emotionally ready for the slow, frustrating, inevitable grind of making something real. That impatience sours, turns into disappointment, and that feeling becomes the real obstacle that kills the whole thing.
So, if we know disappointment is coming, how do we arm ourselves for when it arrives? Well, you need a toolkit, and that's what we're going to do. Let's build one together, right now, with 3 essential tools for your emotional resilience.
These are your 3 pillars of support. Think of it like this. 1 is your external help, someone you can call. And the other 2, they're your internal game, how you treat yourself and your commitment to just facing reality head on. Let's look at each one.
Here's a perfect real-world example. Kiyosaki was in this super tense real estate negotiation, and he could feel his temper just boiling up. Instead of blowing up the deal, he excused himself, went to the bathroom, and called his mentors. Now, the deal still fell through, but the advice he got taught him 3 priceless negotiation techniques he uses to this day. So the outcome was a failure, but the experience, that was a huge success.
All right, on to the second tool. This one is all about that voice inside your head. And it starts with asking yourself this question. So often, our own harshest critic is ourselves, right? We make a mistake and that inner voice just unloads on us. But think about it. If you punish yourself for every single error, you're literally training your brain to be too scared to ever learn anything new. And the final tool is just radical honesty. It goes back to a childhood story where Kiyosaki's dad punished him not for an accident but for trying to cover it up, for running and hiding. It's the same in life. Running away from our mistakes is the easy path. But the real growth, the actual lesson, only comes when we turn around, face them, and tell the truth, starting with ourselves about what really happened. In this quote from Rich Dad, man, it just ties everything together perfectly. Success isn't about avoiding failure. No way. It's measured by your ability to get knocked down, feel that sting of disappointment, pull out the lesson, and get right back up, but this time a little stronger and a little smarter than before.
So, we've got the mindset and we've got the toolkit. But all that knowledge is pretty useless without action, right? So what's the very first step you can take, like today, to start putting all this into practice? Here's the bottom line. You don't really learn by just listening or reading. You learn by doing. So first, give yourself permission to be messy and to make mistakes. That's not failure. That's just collecting data. Second, start small. Put a little bit of money or time on the line. It's amazing how much faster you learn when you have some skin in the game. And third, and most importantly, take action. Shift from just being a consumer of information to an active participant. And that brings us to our final thought. I want you to think about one setback right now, one failure, one disappointment that still kind of stings a little bit. Now, instead of seeing it as a wall that's blocking your path, what if you saw it as the foundation for your very next step? What is that priceless gem of wisdom just waiting for you to uncover?
You know, what if the single biggest thing holding you back isn't your talent or even your circumstances, but just a story you tell yourself? Today, we're going to dive deep into the power of faith. And I'm not talking about faith in something external.
I'm talking about faith in yourself and how the thoughts you choose to believe can literally define your entire life. So let's start with a story. And it begins with a moment of, well, total public humiliation. Picture this. A high school guidance counselor looks two students dead in the eye, the author and his friend Mike, and in front of all their classmates just drops this bombshell. Can you even imagine the sting of that? But here's where things get interesting. Something totally unexpected happened. Instead of letting those words just crush their ambition, it did the exact opposite. That sting, it became fuel. It literally ignited a fire inside them to work harder, to push further, and, you guessed it, to prove that guidance counselor completely and utterly wrong. Okay, now let's fast forward a few years to their high school reunion. They're looking around the room and they notice something kind of wild. Most of those so-called class leaders, the ones everyone expected to succeed, they hadn't really become all that successful. And man, what a powerful lesson that is. It proves that early predictions mean absolutely nothing. The labels other people stick on you, they don't get to define your future. And that, right there, is really the heart of it all. It doesn't matter if you were the valedictorian or the class clown, popular or not. None of it, and I mean none of it, actually matters in the long run. Just like it says here, those shortcomings only count if you think they count. They only have the power you give them. So, okay, if all those external labels don't matter, then what does? Well, the answer is pretty surprising. It's in the mirror of your own mind. Let's really get into how your thoughts, the ones you have every single day, actually shape your reality. I want you to try and reframe how you think about a mirror for a second. It's not just a piece of glass, right? It's not just showing you your reflection. Think of it more like a screen. And on that screen, it's projecting your innermost thoughts, all your self-criticisms, your secret hopes, your real deep-down opinion of yourself. Yeah, do any of these sound a little familiar? I mean, we've all been there, right? Standing in front of the mirror. One day it's, I look horrible. The next day, you might catch a glimpse and have this flash of, hey, I'm looking good. The wild part is, your reflection hasn't really changed, but your thoughts about it, they're all over the place. And that is exactly why these thoughts are so much more important than what we physically look like. They're like a window straight into our soul. They reveal the real truth of how we see ourselves, for better or for worse. Okay, let's get really specific now. We all have them, a set of go-to truths, or maybe we should call them excuses, that we tell ourselves. And they especially come out when we're feeling emotional, right? These are the chains. These are the things that keep us stuck. So when you're facing a new challenge or a really complex problem, have you ever heard that little voice inside you whisper this? Yeah, this is probably one of the most common ones out there. Or maybe this is your go-to, using age as a barrier. The idea that you've either missed your chance or you're just not ready yet. It works both ways. And man, both are so incredibly limiting. And this is a big one. The fear of judgment. We worry so much about what other people might think or say that we let it completely paralyze us. It stops us dead in our tracks from going after what we really want. And this is a really tricky one. Here we see how we can take our greatest responsibilities, the things we care about most, and twist them. Instead of using them as a reason to strive for more, we use them as an excuse to stay put, to stay right where we are, safe and sound. So you see the pattern here? All our words really are mirrors. Every single excuse, every I can't, it's just a reflection of a deeper fear or some limiting belief we're holding on to about ourselves. But here's the game changer. What if all these personal truths that feel so real, so solid, what if they're actually personal lies? Lies that we've just gotten so used to telling ourselves that we've forgotten they're not true. So the key, the real trick, is to challenge that very first thought. The moment you hear that lie, I'm tired, I don't want to learn anything new, you have to stop and consciously search for the deeper truth. And in this case, that truth might be, actually, I love learning. New worlds will open up to me. It's all about replacing that lie with a truth that actually empowers you. And when you do that, when you connect with that deeper, more positive truth, something amazing happens. It's like you tap into a whole new source of energy. You find a part of yourself that's way more powerful than any doubt,
a part of you that is absolutely ready to move forward. All right, so let's bring this all together now. What's the final, most important takeaway here? It's about how you can become bigger than your doubts. Here it is, the simple, powerful truth. The only person who determines the thoughts you choose to believe about yourself is you. That's it. Not your old guidance counselor, not your friends, not even your own fears. The pen is in your hand. You are the one who gets to write the story. And look, this isn't about some single heroic moment of bravery. It's a daily practice. It's about waking up every single morning and preparing to be bigger than that small, fearful part of yourself. It's a conscious choice every day to let your bigger, stronger self lead the way. And so that leaves us with one final, really powerful question for you to carry with you. Because the answer you give yourself, not just today, but every single day, is going to shape your entire reality.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the hugely influential and, often pretty controversial financial philosophy from Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad series. We're going to distill the core ideas that have totally flipped how millions of people think about money.
Okay, let's just jump right in with a quote that really gets to the heart of it all. This completely reframes how you think about work, doesn't it? It's basically saying your salary is there to pay the bills, sure, but it's your job and yours alone to actually build wealth. And if that last slide hits home, it's probably because you felt this feeling of working harder and harder, but, not really getting anywhere financially. It's that exact feeling of being trapped that this whole Rich Dad philosophy claims it can solve.
So what's going on here? Well, the Rich Dad philosophy argues that the financial playbook our parents and grandparents followed, the one most of us were taught, is just broken. It's obsolete. The world changed, but the advice didn't keep up.
You know the drill, right? Go to school, get a good job, save your money. It sounds so familiar. For decades, that was the absolute gold standard for a secure life. But the core argument here is that in our fast-paced information age, that safe path might actually be the riskiest path of all.
And this metaphor just perfectly nails the problem. All that old advice is about trading your time directly for money. It's about hauling buckets. You haul one bucket, you get paid for one bucket. But what happens if you stop hauling? Maybe you get sick, you go on vacation, you lose your job. Well, the income just stops, dead in its tracks. Your security is totally tied to you showing up and working.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. This philosophy directly goes after some of our most deeply held beliefs about money. It's basically asking you to unlearn everything you thought you knew.
And here it is, the most famous and definitely the most controversial idea of them all. For generations, we've been told that buying a house is the best investment you can possibly make. The Rich Dad philosophy says, nope. It flat out says your personal home is not an asset. But how can that be?
Well, the logic is all about redefining these two simple words based on one thing: cash flow. Just forget the dictionary for a second. In this world, if something puts money into your pocket, it's an asset. If it takes money out of your pocket, like a mortgage, property taxes, home repairs, then it's a liability. Simple as that.
So if hauling buckets is the problem, then what in the world is the solution? This philosophy gives us a totally new goal to aim for.
The new goal is to build pipelines. See, these are the true assets. We're talking about things like rental properties, businesses you own, stocks that pay dividends. They put money in your pocket every single month, whether you're actively working or not. The whole game shifts from you working for money to making your money work for you.
This all sounds fantastic, right? But how do you actually start building these pipelines? Well, the source material lays out a really clear framework to get you started on that path.
And notice something here. This path doesn't start with some wild, complicated investment. No, it starts with the absolute basics. The whole idea is that you have to get your own financial house in order first. You got to get a handle on your spending and your debt before you can really move on to the fun part. Step 4, expanding your means by buying those assets that produce cash flow. And this really shows the whole process as a cycle. It starts with that dream, right? The aspiration. That's what drives you to acquire the knowledge. But listen, the most important step, and honestly, the hardest one, is taking what you've learned and actually applying it in the real world. Because knowledge without action, well, it's just trivia, isn't it?
And that right there brings us to the ultimate point. The foundation of this whole philosophy isn't some secret stock tip or a get-rich-quick scheme. No, it's something way more powerful, and it's accessible to everyone. It's all about real financial education. And we're not just talking about learning a few terms. We're talking about changing your entire context, your whole point of view on how money actually works. It's about learning to see opportunities where other people only see risk, and understanding the systems that actually govern wealth.
Once you have this new context, the philosophy says you get these 5 unfair advantages. This means learning how to legally use the tax code to your benefit, how to use debt to buy assets instead of just liabilities, and how to manage risk instead of just running away from it. These are the tools the wealthy have been using forever that most people just don't know about.
So, at the end of the day, the message is that financial freedom isn't really about what you do, it's about what you know. It's about being brave enough to challenge that old advice, to redefine your financial vocabulary, and to just commit to always learning. That knowledge is the ultimate unfair advantage. So the only question left is, how are you going to use it?